Kyle Larson won at Kansas Speedway in the closest margin of victory in a NASCAR Cup Series race ever, edging out Chris Buescher by what NASCAR is saying is 1/1000th of a second. I actually think it's probably closer than that. Timing and scoring, I think I saw was .000. So it's probably closer than 0.001 seconds. But I just don't think that they have the ability to factor in what the actual time was. So they went with .001. And we have Brad Moran to kind of talk us through. He is the NASCAR Cup Series managing director, and he did an appearance on Sirius XM NASCAR Radio earlier today, and he kind of explains the camera technology that they used to determine the winner, discuss the controversy surrounding the paint on the track and how that doesn't matter. But before we get to this, I'd like to ask you, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos here at John Trent Racing. Before we get to what Brad Moran has to say, I do want to point out that I still think there is some controversy surrounding this finish. Obviously, you see this photo here. This is, I believe, the high-speed camera photo that NASCAR used to determine that Kyle Larson won the race. I still think that there needs to be a little bit more transparency surrounding this photo. Obviously, you have two lines here, a black line and a red line. I assume that the black line is supposed to be the start-finish line, although in this picture, we have no way of knowing where that is. And I do think this is important because you have that line there, and the red line is kind of showing that Larson is indeed in front of Chris Buescher. And the reason why I think the fact that we need a little bit more understanding on where the actual finish line is because if we look at some other photos here, you can see this one here. I think it matches up pretty accurately to where they're taking, and it is past the painted line on the track. And so this looks like where they took the photo with the camera, which is much further past the painted line. And again, we'll listen to Brad Moran. He says the painted line doesn't matter. So, but I do think that where the line is matters, and I don't think NASCAR has really showed us where the line is. And if we're looking at it here, clearly Larson is ahead of Chris Buescher. You can even tell with your eyes here. And I think this is indeed the photo that they use to determine. However, if we look at when they're actually crossing the line, I think it's a little bit more suspect. And you can also see that when they're first touching the actual painted line, which again, they're saying the paint doesn't matter, but I'm saying that where is the actual finish line that they're using? And I think that plays a big role into why this is such a controversy, is because we don't know where the line is. And well, the line that they're showing us is a lot farther past the line on the track, which I think a lot of people assume is the line that where they're supposed to be capturing the photo. And you can see here when they're actually at the line on the track that's painted on the track, regardless of how crooked it is, Chase Elliott is not at Kyle Larson's bumper, which you can see he is in the official NASCAR photo that they use to determine the winner. And I think that Buescher and Larson are almost dead even here in this line, and I've been consistent with that. So I do think that where the finish line is matters. I think NASCAR should be transparent on that. Obviously, I think we can assume that they're telling us that the actual line is past the white line, and it's almost at the kind of checkered formation that they've got there for the stripe. And we see that here in this photo, which looks to be where the camera took the picture here. And as Wesley S1910 points out, is that they are already significantly past the painted line. So I still think this is a controversy. I think that NASCAR, if you're going to have painted lines, I think that the actual where the cameras are should line up with the edge of that line. So I think the painted line should matter. I think that this is something that they need to fix moving forward. But let's listen to what Brad Moran had to say here. His explanation regarding the photo technology that they use and how they determined that Kyle Larson was indeed the winner. Again, this is over on Sirius XM NASCAR Radio. It's about 2 minutes and 15 seconds into their conversation. It's about a 13-minute interview here, but let's take a listen here.
Came up at the end of the race was the line on the racetrack versus the line used to determine the race winner. Can you give the listener and the fan a little insight as why the two are not the same?
Sure, and and I mean they're very close to the same, but we don't go off the accuracy of a painter that paints a line on the racetrack. It's for fan, for a visual for the fans, for the teams to get a visual. But when we get talking this close and we make sure the finishes are right, like many other sports, we have a laser line that is pencil thin. And this camera takes anywhere from 4,000 to 20,000 frames per second, and that's how close it is that we see at the start finish line. There's obviously different textures in the asphalt and the concrete, and by no means is that line, not that it was out by a lot or anything like that, but we obviously have a much tighter tolerance on how who wins a cup race, or any race for that matter, in NASCAR.
So again, I think where the line is significantly matters, and I think it determined who won this race. Again, we go back to these images, you can see this looks to be the camera where they were at on the track, because you can see Chase Elliott is at Larson's bumper. They're already past the painted line. So where is the line? The line is clearly in the middle of the start-finish line rather than at the beginning. Because you'll see here that Elliott's car is not at Larson's bumper. There's a gap there. And that Buescher and Larson are next to each other. So again, if you're going to have a painted line, you're selling this as they got to the painted line as the finish. You're saying that it's the closest finish ever based on this photo finish. Then your digital line, your laser, I think, should be lined up with the painted line. I don't know why that would be difficult to do. I don't think it should be. And then also, if you're using a laser, and I'm not like an expert on this, but I think that the laser probably also is not very reliable in this case, given the fact that Larson is clearly on banking and Buescher is on a flat surface. And I don't think a laser factors in the two different planes that the vehicles are on. So that could be something, and you can kind of tell here that this photo doesn't. It does not look like it's factoring in. It looks like they're on almost the same plane. And that's how they're using this line, whereas they're not on the same plane. So I find that that is something that I'd like NASCAR to answer as well. And I think this is something that I think they should solve. Obviously, these problems probably didn't exist really before, given the fact that even at Atlanta, where it was, 0.002, I think it was pretty obvious that Suarez won based on the photo finish. You could tell that Suarez was the first one to get to the painted line. That was the line that we were all using. Now, all of a sudden, the painted line doesn't matter. Probably because the laser was synced up with the painted line, and here it doesn't look like it was. So I think that they need to fix this moving forward. I do think this is still a problem that they're going to have. I think that, I know Buescher's crew chief accepted everything that NASCAR kind of told them after the race. But if I'm RFK, I would probably want to stay on them on this, ask some more questions, ask them, is the line matched up to the paint? That's maybe something that you ask in a driver's meeting or something now moving forward. So especially at tracks where you might have any track now, because there's so many green, white checkered finishes. You're going to have people on top of each other. You're going to have kind of these side-by-side battles towards the end of the race. So I think that's something they need to look into. But Moran goes on to talk about the cameras here. Let's take a listen.
The other question was timing and scoring said one thing. We're curious, where are the transponders in the race cars, and how does that get communicated back to you guys in the tower there that you saw that first?
Yeah, so the transponders click automatically. So, I mean, the pylons, we use those for our lineups throughout the event. Like I say, we do not use them for anything that happens at the start-finish line or pit out at all during the event, during stage breaks or so on. But they're very accurate. I mean, they're accurate to, almost 1.5 thou to but plus or minus. So they could be out they could basically, in layman's terms, they could be out 0.003 of a second, plus or minus. So they're very accurate, but they're not as accurate as the cameras that are used. They are a transponder. They obviously shoot a signal, and the signal strength can come into play. The ride heights on the cars can be slightly different. There's just little variances that could happen, and obviously that's why we are prepared. Our cameras are calibrated every week, and we go to the work, the effort to make sure all our cameras stay calibrated, ready to go for every race at a National Series event.
You talked about the quality.
So that is what Brad Moran had to say. The fact that he's talking about the cameras being calibrated, I think that's also something that RFK might want to look into to ensure that that was indeed the case here at Kansas Speedway. But again, I still think that there is some controversy here. I know I'll probably have people be like, oh, you just are salty. You can't accept that Larson won. I can't accept that Kyle Larson won. But I do think that there is still some questions here about where the start-finish line is, about the cameras, how they factor in the different planes that both Chris Buescher and Kyle Larson are. And I think those are big questions that I'd like NASCAR to give me an answer. And I think they owe us an answer. I think RFK Racing deserves an answer on this. I think this is important to get an answer to. I mean, because again, these photos here look like they're significantly past that white line, and that looks to be where they're saying the start-finish line is. And it's not close to the beginning of that painted line. I mean, that's I don't know how long that is. I mean, it's probably looks like a good half a foot, 6 inches there in that painted line, and that's a huge difference. That's a huge difference. But let me know what you guys make of this. Let me know what you make of what Brad Moran had to say here. Do you think that the questions I'm asking here are relevant and pertinent? Do you think that they're like, I need to just get off this topic, move on? It doesn't matter. Kyle Larson won. If it comes up in another race, like we'll just accept NASCAR's ruling and move forward. Let me know what your thoughts are on this. Let me know in the comments below.